I'd like to request Mr. Ashok Advani, Chairman and Publisher of Business India Publications, and Mrs. Firoza Bilamoria, Managing Director of Business India Publications, to kindly escort the following dignitaries onto the stage. Mr. Kamal Nath, the Honourable Minister for Road Transport and Highways, Mr. O.P. Bhatt, Chairman and Managing Director, State Bank of India, and Mr. M.D. Malia, Chairman, Bank of Baroda. Would you please come onto the stage, gentlemen? Now, may I call on Mr. Ashok Advani to give the welcome address. Mr. Ashok Advani.
Mr. Kamal Nath, Honorable Union Minister for Road Transport and Highways, our chief guest for the evening. It is indeed a privilege to have you here this evening with us, and you've so kindly flown down specially for this function to be with us for this few hours. Mr. Malia, Chairman, Bank of Baroda, and your colleagues from the Bank of Baroda, who have been chosen Business India's Best Bank 2010. A round of applause, please, for Mr. Malia and all his colleagues. Mr. Jean de Guy-Chetens, Trade and Investment Commissioner, Wallonia Economic Representation, our presenting sponsor for the evening. Mr. Salil Parekh, CEO of Capgemini, Financial Services India, our co-sponsor. Members of the jury who selected the best bank, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to Business India's Best Bank Award ceremony, the 12th year since the inception of this prestigious award. We are delighted to have you with us here to celebrate this wonderful occasion, a celebration of what is a coveted recognition in the banking community. At Business India, we've always maintained that what distinguishes an award is also the caliber of the members that select the panel. Members who command respect amongst their peers. Each year, Business India makes sure that the panel to select the best bank comprises the best professionals. And this year we started a tradition of having the panel chaired by the previous year's awardees chairman, and so we're grateful for Mr. Bhatt being here. The panel this year, other than Mr. Bhatt, had Mr. Ashok Wadhwa, CEO of Ambit Holdings, who's also with us, Kaushik Chatterjee, Group CEO of Tata Steel, Mr. Nava, Managing Director and CEO of WL Ross, and Mr. Khasnobis, Managing Director and CEO of ASL, Asset Reconstruction Company of India. The Bank of India, of course, has been a consistent performer. In many ways, it has been one of the top, and you could say 4, 5, 6 banks in the country for a long time. All of you will be receiving a copy of the cover story on your way out, which explains why the panel, headed by Mr. Bhatt, chose the Bank of Baroda as the best bank. And the story sets out the remarkable achievements of the Bank of Baroda under Mr. M.D. Malia and some of his predecessors like Dr. A.C. Shah, who are sitting with us here today. And the huge steps that the bank has taken for financial inclusion has been one of the considerations that weighed heavily with the panel this year. Of course, in an old bank like the Bank of Baroda, there have been a large number of illustrious predecessors on whose work Mr. Malia has built. Somebody asked, why do we have a Best Banks Award? We believe that banking is one of the oldest service industries in the country. We've had a long tradition of banking, which goes back literally hundreds of years. Even our modern joint stock banks have a long history. The State Bank of India goes back, 204 years. And the Bank of Baroda is 102 years old. And even the cooperative banking sector is over 100 years old. By comparison, the Chinese do not have the same banking history. Yet today, 3 of the largest banks in the world are state-controlled Chinese banks. Many have argued that several of our nationalized banks ought to be merged. The State Bank of India has started steps to amalgamate all its subsidiaries. But there is a question here. Is bigger always better? Should we too be building banks that are too big to fail? On the one hand, you have to have size to compete with the big global banks, some of whom are also represented here. And therefore, there is a case for allowing our bankers, particularly our younger bankers, to have a free hand to grow. But again, the question can be asked that in a democracy, is it not better to have 100 flowers, or should I say 100 banks, bloom? Even after the failure of the large number of the banks in the United States recently, there are still 7,780 banks in the United States insured by the FDIC. In a much bigger India, there are only 88 banks, including foreign banks. Of course, the banks have a large number of branches, and there are well over 55,000 branches. There are also about 220 cooperative banks in the country. But does it really take 7 or 10 years to issue new banking licenses? This is not the occasion to debate these issues, but there are issues that we need to face in the banking sector. And all I'm doing today is using this occasion to point out the huge scope for the banking industry. In fact, Business India has consistently argued that banking services can be as big an opportunity for India as the software industry. And if Bank of Baroda, under Mr. Malia, is able to go down the path chosen of financial inclusion, and if Bank of Baroda, along with a large number of other banks, can pull it off, then you can imagine how different a country India will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashok, for your in-depth and thoughtful welcome address. I'd like to call on Mr. O.P. Bhatt to enlighten us a bit about the selection process of choosing the Best Bank Award. Mr. O.P. Bhatt, please.
Good evening. Honorable Minister, Mr. Kamal Nathji, Mr. Malia, the recipient of today's award and honor, Mr. Advani, the gracious host for the evening, and Ms. Bilimoria, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. For me, it's a great pleasure and a great honor to be here to participate in the process of felicitating my friend and colleague, Mr. Malia, for what he, his bank, and his team Bank of Baroda, have achieved not only this year, this is the year they got recognized, but have been achieving consistently over the last several years. This particular function at which this felicitation is being given, this is something which I got last year and which is why I am here, but I'll come to that a little later. But what impressed me most when I got this award last year, and I realized it when I was sitting here at this moment of time, somebody was saying something, and at that moment I realized that this function was meant for only one person, and that was me. Now, I have been to several award ceremonies, either in the audience or as one of the recipients, and I have not been to a single award ceremony where the award ceremony was focused only on one person. This entire evening, the glitz, the glamour, the entertainment, people such as Mr. Kabir Bedi, CJ, the Honorable Minister, and all of you distinguished ladies and gentlemen from Mumbai, all of you, everything, all the hours that you are spending here today, this evening, only for one man. Richly deserved, but I am... Thank you. Very richly deserved. But I am not aware of any other award ceremony in the financial sector which gives this kind of single-minded honor to the person who deserves it. And to that, I think I take my hats off to Mr. Advani and to Business India. A very, very unique thing that they are doing. And of course, at that point, I realized that I'm supposed to be giving a speech also. So I hope Mr. Mali has got his speech ready. In most functions, they have a chief guest, and then they have a guest of honor, and they have a special guest, and they keep multiplying it. And that is what they do with awards, a special award, and an old age award, and a youth award, and all that. This is something which is not done here. So because I was the recipient of the award last year, this year I was asked to head the jury for selecting the recipient for the current year. We had a list of 76 banks which was given to us by Business India, and in their list were all kind of business parameters, from net profit to business growth to segments in which business has grown, return on asset, return on equity, NPS, all kinds of parameters were there. What we did was that we reduced this list from 76 to 30. We took the top performing banks out of those 76, and then on a process of selection through discussion by the jury, we quickly reduced this based on certain critical parameters from 30 to 14. And when we went, now all this was done on the basis of quantitative parameters, quantifiable, verifiable, audited, everything. From 14 to 2, we went on a number of qualitative parameters which different members of the jury, whatever their slant was on what is more important, or whatever the experience they had from the banking services that they were getting from their respective banks, on that basis, several qualitative parameters were discussed. So they were brand building, they were innovation, they were technology, they were customer relationship, customer service, they were financial inclusion, inclusive growth, sustainable growth. It was consistency. So several of these qualitative parameters, including corporate social responsibility and how a bank is discharging these. So many of these parameters was discussed, and on the basis of these parameters, we narrowed down the selection from 14 to 2 banks. Now one of these, the other bank, which is not here today, was headed by a lady. So no guesses for that, who that bank was or who that lady was. That was Axis Bank. And it was a slightly tough call to decide which is the better bank of the two, Bank of Baroda or Axis. And ultimately, the reason Bank of Baroda got the award or the selection was because they have been consistent across a set of multiple parameters. So while they were not really at the top at everything, but if you were to take 5 parameters, 8 parameters, 10 parameters, on all the parameters, they were consistently performing well above average. So that is one of the strongest points that was there in their favor. Of course, there were many other points which I mentioned just now, and which is why the jury, at the end of a 2-hour plus discussion, unanimously decided that Bank of Baroda is the bank which should be getting this award for this year. I just want to add that the past year for which the performance is being judged and the year immediately before that have been difficult for economies and banks across the world. And in this very difficult time, both the Indian economy and the Indian banking system have been fated across the world. It is said that we have, if not the best, one of the best banking systems anywhere in the world, and we proved our mettle in the financial and economic crisis that was there. Now, among the best banking system in the world, to be chosen as the best bank is definitely a great, great honor, which goes to my friend Mr. Malia from Bank of Baroda. And mind you, there is a lot of discussion and there is a lot of speculation which is going on around the world with the regulation that is proposed to be tightened. And what are they going to tighten? Today, the capital which foreign banks in the western regions are supposed to have is just about 2%. They want to increase in stages between now till the year 2019 from 2 to 7%. Indian banks are already well capitalized, tier 1 capital at more than 9% and giving, whether it is return on assets or return on equity, comparable to their global peers. So the banking system in India, despite all the difficulties and turbulence that was there, has really been performing exceedingly well, and in that, the Bank of Baroda has taken the cake. My heartiest congratulations to you. My good wishes to you and your team that you continue with this performance and come back here again and again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bhatt, for all the hard work that you put in arriving at this decision. Business India has a small token of appreciation for you. And I'd like to call upon Mr. Salil Parekh, Chairman of Capgemini India and the Head of Financial Services Global Business Unit, Capgemini. Would you please present this token of Business India's appreciation to Mr. O.P. Bhatt? Thank you, gentlemen. Distinguished guests, you know, we are delighted to have in our midst a highly popular and very dynamic minister, the Minister for Road Transport and Highways, Mr. Kamal Nath, and to top it all, he's our chief guest. So, Business India has always had a great regard for him. In fact, if I remember rightly, you were the chief guest at the 25th celebrations of the Businessman of the Year in 2006. So everyone's looking forward to a stimulating address from you. And to welcome and introduce you this evening, I call on the Managing Director of Business India Publications, Mrs. Firoza Bilamoria.
Mr. Kamal Nath, thank you for being with us. I know you had to squeeze us into your busy schedule, and we're really delighted that you did that and came for 3 hours, 4 hours. It's very touched. Ladies and gentlemen of this distinguished gathering, it is my privilege to introduce our chief guest, Mr. Kamal Nath, our Union Cabinet Minister for Road Transport and Highways. Mr. Nath is one of the most enduring ministers of the Congress-led government at the center. But more importantly, in his current portfolio, he holds the key to India being able to leapfrog to one of the 3 top economies in the world. And it goes without saying to this gathering, sustaining a healthy economy will always pose a challenge without a rock-solid infrastructure, such that incorporates well-connected road movement and which can seamlessly unite the vast geography of our country. The minister requires no introduction to this audience. He has been active in the country's public landscape for 3 decades now, having been elected to the Lok Sabha for the first time in 1980 from the Chhindwara constituency in Madhya Pradesh. He is now an 8th term MP from that constituency, which just goes to show how popular he is and how much he must have done for his constituents. The minister's list of achievements would take me all night to read, so let me limit myself to a few. Mr. Nath joined the central government in 1991 as Minister of State with independent charge, Minister of State for Environment and Forests. Mr. Jairam Ramesh may be taking all the limelight these days in this particular portfolio, but it was Kamal Nath who first brought attention to the environment. He did several remarkable contributions to many and brought in a lot of policies, several policies on the environment, both domestically and on the global scene during his tenure there. He became Minister for Textiles, again with independent charge, in 1995. During his tenure, the country touched new heights in the production of production and export of cotton, and the new textile policy was successfully launched. In 2004, when the UPA government came to power, he was sworn in as Union Cabinet Minister for Commerce and Industry. Shortly after taking over, India saw its first comprehensive foreign trade policy, laying out a coherent roadmap with a twin focus on exports as well as employment. By the time the UPA completed its first five-year term, he was successful in tripling India's foreign trade and engineering a seven-fold increase in FDI inflow to India. When he became Minister of Road Transport and Highways last year in 2009, everyone welcomed the appointment, as India's bumpy highways and potholed roads could well do with a man of his dedication and drive. He has set for himself the almost impossible target of building 20 kilometers of road a day. And he continues to persist with his targets against heavy odds. We wish him the very best, as always, and have full confidence that he will deliver. Mr. Kamal Nath, podium is yours.
Mr. Ashok Advani, Mr. Malia, Mr. O.P. Bhatt, Mrs. Bilamoria, and Kabir, thank you for that very generous introduction. And I'm delighted to be here. I was here at the Business India Awards in 2006. At that time, I was the Commerce Minister. Well, there's a big difference being Commerce Minister and in this job. In my previous job, that's conceptual. Even talking is progress. In this job, talking is not progress. You have to really be producing what you're saying. But I'm delighted to be here in this distinguished gathering of bankers, of the business community, and more so when the financial sector honors one of its peers, a very well-deserved honor. And Mr. Bhatt, how you explained, you arrived at this decision, I completely shared it, and I was telling Mr. Malia about a very small incident where much before you thought of the award, somebody else told me that the best bank was the Bank of Baroda. So at the onset, I want to congratulate Mr. Malia and the Bank of Baroda for your leadership and the sterling example which you and the Indian banking sector are setting. In 2008, I remember when we had this financial crisis, people called it the global financial crisis, and I used to tell them, what the hell is this global financial crisis? It's your financial crisis. In India, in China, and 60% of the world. We don't have this global economic crisis. This is a Western economic crisis. And I remember, for many years at the World Economic Forum in Davos, at all the sessions, I used to be told that India must have reforms in its financial sector. We must reform and follow the best practices of the Western banking system. And I didn't know where to look. I used to look left, I used to look left, I used to look right, and I used to say that, well, I know the best practices. We are trying to follow the next practices, and it is this next practices which is going to hold India in good stead. This year, when I went to the World Economic Forum, it was those same financial institutions, those same bankers, the global bankers, who at the same program I was with. And I was telling them that, well, how are things? I said, well, I am where I was. Tell me where you are. Because I said, in my country, banks are giving money to government. And in your country, government is giving money to banks. That is the big difference. And I also added, tongue-in-cheek, that in India, we don't have your crisis because our bankers don't speak such good English. All countries where bankers spoke a lot of English, and you can see this, analyze this. You see Japan, there was no crisis. You see Italy, there was no crisis. All bankers which spoke a lot of English were in a lot of trouble. So I would really advise you, Mr. Bhatt and Mr. Balia, that don't let your bankers speak too much of English to understand those fancy products those fancy products, and a financial system. A financial system based on valuations, valuations which create the paper, and the paper which create the liquidity. So we didn't have that financial system. And this is the greatest success story of India. That while India was told for so many years, we needed to reform, our banks were no good, and when the crisis came, we emerged as the best. Today, while in the Western world, banks are struggling to survive, in India, banks are struggling to grow. Mr. Ashok Advani was saying they're not getting licenses. That's the big difference. And this is what is the edifice of India's growth. When we talk of India's growth, when we talk of India's growth trajectory, of course we have challenges. India is a very complex country. We are a complex country. We are not only the largest democracy, we are the rowdiest democracy. And being a rowdy democracy, we are proud of it. We are proud of it because a rowdy democracy means there is great consensus. When Dr. Manmohan Singh launched the economic reforms in 1991, I remember it was in July of 1991 in a cabinet meeting, where some of the ministers said that are we going back on some of the principles laid down after independence? The world had changed, but at that time our ministers had not. And we went ahead with our reforms process, which was India specific. In India, whether it's in the banking sector or otherwise, we have to be very India specific. Which country in the world, which central bank, the Reserve Bank, directs the banks that this is going to be priority sector, this will be that, this will be this. And it is this which makes India stand apart. And when we moved along in our reforms, I remember being in Bombay in those days, and there was a lot of resistance. We had the famous Bombay Club. You remember there was the Bombay Club for all of you who are veterans of that time, who said these reforms are going to be a failure. And Ashok, if you pick up your magazine at that time, you will yourself see that there was a lot of resistance. There was not only a resistance within government, within the political system. There was a resistance in the business community. Yeah, well, Ashok is telling me he criticized the Bombay Club. Well, now those same members of the Bombay Club are the biggest champions of reforms. So it was an India-specific model of reforms in which we moved ahead. And the challenge was, how do we liberalize our trade? How do we liberalize investment? It's not that we don't have a challenge today. Our reforms haven't ended. Our next step in reforms, which we are now addressing, are reforms in governance. It took so long to transfer money. All the big bookkeeping which was done. Technology has changed it all. Today, if you have the FedEx and you have the internet, you are a global company. So a global company is anyone who has access to all, to the internet and to the FedEx or to any courier. It is this ability again of our business and of our banking sector to change, to adapt to this, which has led to this great success which we've had. But as we talk of our success, as we continue on our growth trajectory, in India, we have not only the challenge of attaining and sustaining growth, but the challenge of managing growth. What is the kind of growth we want in our country? What is the kind of growth which will be acceptable to the people? And as was said, when we talk of this, we talk of all-inclusive growth. How do we generate economic activity in the Northeast? How do we generate economic activity in the backward states? And it is this generation of economic activity which has started happening. So when we see figures of our auto sector growing over 30%, what is this driven by? It's driven by the increased economic activity and the increasing disposable incomes in rural India. When banks are going rural, I know one major foreign bank who said, we want to set up some rural branches. They were talking to me a couple of months ago, giving me their roadmap. and talking to me about rural branches. I was surprised. I said, how this language is changing. It's because of the increased disposable incomes. Disposable incomes in rural India. In my own district, I see this great change taking place. 5 lakh rupee income in Delhi means nothing, but a 5 lakh rupee income in rural India means an SUV. And it is this which is going to be the biggest challenge for the banking sector, coupled with our demographics. Sometimes these are figures which are not on any screen. You see figures on your television screen, on your computer screen, and now with 3G even on your phone screen. The figures of disposable incomes, of our demographics, of our young age profiles, why youngsters are willing to drive 2.5 hours to see a movie. And this is what is going to be driving the growth. When I was textile minister, I remember we had the textile quotas for exports. And the same textile industry in 2008, end of 2008, met me when I was commerce minister that we are doomed. There's this crisis. Europe has cancelled its orders. The US has cancelled its orders. I said, forget it. You're going to see an Indian market boom. And I met them 2 months ago, and all of them are booming because there is this great transformation taking place from the pajama to the jeans. We've skipped the stage of the trouser. And we are moving from the dhoti to the jeans. And the products, the products which they sold to Europe and to the United States are now being absorbed by the Indian market, by rural India, by a growing middle class. So when we have this young, aspiring generation of people in our country, with 450 million people in the age group of 18 to 35, we are the largest aspirational society on this planet. And an aspirational society is what? Is what the business community, the banks need to be addressing, and government and politics. Because it is this aspirational community which presents the biggest challenge to politicians. They have the most demands. There's no shortcut. There's no shortcut to meeting their aspirations. So, being the largest aspirational society today, the enormity of the challenges we have, and what happened in India. Growth preceded infrastructure. We never knew we'd grow so fast. So growth has preceded infrastructure. Today, when I talk of building highways and roads, I'm not talking about building for the future. I'm talking about building to catch up with the past. We are building today to catch up with the past, not for the future. And if we don't catch up with this past, the infrastructure deficit we have in the country is going to become even more profound. It stares us on its face. And if we have to continue to grow at this growth trajectory, the Prime Minister says 9%, somebody says 9.5%. And if we can meet our small targets, our ambitious targets, just in the road sector, it will add 2% to GDP. And we'll straight jump from 8.5% to 10.5%. That is the enormity of the challenge we have. And if we don't do it, roads impacts agriculture. We are the second largest producer of fruits and vegetables. 40% rot. We have ports without port connectivity. We have airports sometimes which you can't get to. We have roads which are the most unsafe in the world. And we have the second largest road network in the world, 3.4 million kilometers. Only 2% of them are national highways. That is 70,000 kilometers. And out of the 70,000 kilometers, 16,000 is one lane. Just one rickety lane. And in India, 70% of goods and freight move by roads. So the huge challenge we have before us is an enormous challenge. We've said this, we've decided, and I want to tell the banking community here that we have to now be looking at this in a different way. It was all right, we had 5, 6 projects, 10 projects in a year, which banks had to finance, whether it's debt or equity. How do we get in the long-term financing? How do we get in the pension funds? How do we get in the insurance funds? Because it's all of you who interface with all these funds. We need to look at insurance funds and pension funds. How do we engage them with India in the road sector? I've been traveling all over the world, talking to the pension funds, talking to many of the institutions, and I keep telling them that the safest investment destination, the safest parking lot for pension funds is India. What is the risk? You have a construction risk. If you've got a good construction company, there is no risk. Next is traffic risk. Well, India is not short of traffic. And then is political risk. What is the political risk? It doesn't apply to roads. And in every sector of our infrastructure, if it's ports, we are building up millions of tons of capacity. We are going ahead with our underground and our urban transportation. And by 2017, Delhi's underground, Delhi's metro will be larger than the London underground. We would have built 417 kilometers. So this challenge is huge in the energy sector, in our power sector. Again, what we got to do is to build for the future. We are still catching up for the past. And it is this infrastructure deficit which is the biggest challenge. And within this infrastructure challenge, the challenge in roads stares us most to the face. Because if you talk of health and education, that's for those who need it. Roads impacts everybody's lives. Roads impacts everybody's lives. And roads generate economic activity. Over the last 1 year, my effort was to ensure that we build roads across the country. We look at the Northeast. We look at Kashmir. We look at Orissa. We look at Bihar. If you'll see the internet of how many projects were awarded, how many projects were awarded in Orissa and Bihar, which was never done. So how do we generate this economic activity across the country? Because as has always been said, wealth does not build roads, wealth does not generate roads, roads generate wealth. And that has to be our biggest challenge and towards the all-inclusive growth we want. When you build a road in a backward area, you're working towards all-inclusive growth. You're generating economic activity. And it's one of the most important ingredients of inclusive growth. Our banking sector, the way we are growing, where the banks grow with some 20%, some 30%, some 40%, the skilled manpower, the talent of bankers which will be needed. If you simulate the future, it's not projecting the future. Banks need to be simulating the future by figures which are not on the screens. How does a bank build up? And I see this as the greatest challenge. We have the intellectual. India has demonstrated to the world that we have the intellectual abilities. We have the entrepreneurial abilities. Now, we've got to synergize both these abilities to ensure that we are continuing with this growth and show to the world. Because the world is looking at India. I was in China 10 days ago, and the Chinese told me that we want to have an agreement with India on roads. I said, what agreement do you want? They said, well, we want to have exchange of technology. We want to have an MOU. I said, certainly we'll have an MOU. Well, China's system of governance is different. I always say that China has its own genius, India has its own genius. And it'll be the Indian genius which is going to be the sustainable model in the future. In conclusion, I again want to thank Business India Group, particularly Ashok Advani, for inviting me here again to be with you. And more so that today we honor and we recognize one of our great institutions. Our banking, our public sector banks were discarded, saying these banks will never make it. They are basket cases of disaster. But Indian banks have demonstrated, not to Indians, but to the world. And that is what has helped. That is what has helped. That not only has the world's perception about India changed, our own perception about ourselves has changed. And you all have played a great role in it. Congratulations, Mr. Malia. Congratulations, the Bank of Baroda.
Thank you, Kamalnathji, for your profound, witty, and insightful observations on the banking system, on the country in general, and the nature of social and economic change that is happening, and for all the trouble you've taken in assembling your thoughts and sharing them with us and coming all the way from Delhi. We wish to present you a small memento, and I'd like to call on Mr. Jean-Guy Chattens, the Trade and Investment Commissioner of Bologna Export and Investment, who is our presenting sponsor this evening, to present a token of Business India's appreciation.
Honorable Mr. Kamal Nath, Honorable Mr. Jean-Joël Skittekat, Consul General of Belgium in Mumbai, Mr. Bhatt, Mr. Balai, Mr. Advani, Mrs. Billy Moria, aware of the fact that we are going through a period of industrial and economic uncertainty due to the globalization, Wallonie stresses on the necessity to apply some kind of support to the SME companies. The region is convinced that the answer of these difficulties lies in the technical and commercial agreements between companies of different regions of the world. This rule applies to the big companies as well. Why is the same rule not applied to the SMEs? Maybe because they limit themselves to the research of immediate contracts, even if they know for sure that these technical and commercial partnerships could be beneficial to them. Hence, it is the role of public institutions, in collaboration with other public institutions, federations, or trade associations, to help these companies to construct their future. Within the framework of penetration into the European market, the collaboration could be found in Wallonia, who has entered the third millennium with energy of those who wish to be good the time lost. Look at Europe from Belgium gives you a clearer view of the continent than when you look at it from Mumbai. Look at Europe from the India Welcome Office, based at Liège in Belgium, a business center put at the disposal for the Indian businessmen by Wallonia, which allows a better access to Europe. In fact, in a distance of 500 kilometers around this city lies 60% of the purchasing power of the European Union. It means 420 million consumers, and 30% of the worldwide consumption of medicines. The region of Wallonia is the southern region of Belgium, where French is spoken. The two other regions making up Belgium are Flanders and Brussels. On the basis of a study defining the development potential of the various sectors of the Wallonic economy, the government was able to identify 6 priority markets in which Wallonia could excel at a European or a global level: aeronautics and space, agro-industry, life science, transport and logistics, mechanical engineering, green technology, and eco-development. I, on behalf of the Wallonia Foreign Trade and Investment Agency, would like to thank the Business India team for giving us an opportunity to participate in this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chattens. I've been sent a number of repeated messages by people in the crowd to ask the people who are having a great time at the bar to contain their joy within themselves and make less noise. We have no objection to your enjoyment, merely to the volume that is distracting us from the larger cause at hand. So thank you for your silence. You know, I had a banker friend in Los Angeles, and I said to him, why are you a banker? And he said, because It is the purest way of making money. No manufacturing, selling, advertising, inventory, none of that. The purest way of making money, you make money with money. So there is a genius to that. There is a special skill in that. And so when an award is being given for the best bank, it has to be a very special moment for everybody. And as William Thackeray once said, next to excellence is the appreciation of it. And so we have the moment that we've been waiting for, the Business India Award for the Best Bank of 2010. Can we dim the lights, please?
My heartiest congratulations to Mr. M.D. Mallya, Chairman and Managing Director of Bank of Baroda, for getting this hugely prestigious award from Business India. And what a person he is. Ever since he got the chairmanship of Bank of Baroda, he's been turning the bank around. He's been pressing all the right levers. He started turning his bank, the Bank of Baroda, even before he got comfortable in his chair. And he did all the right things. He looked at growth, bottom line, top line. He looked at technology. He looked at financial inclusion. He looked at everything which is relevant to the banking industry and to the current state of the Indian economy today. And he did everything right.
In recent years, I have seen Bank of Baroda's renewal as a bank, whether in terms of its branding, its focus on technology, or meeting customer expectations.
Mr. Mallya takes interest in each and every activity of the bank, right from a small liability product up to customer service, attention to customers, prompt response to customer queries, references, grievances.
Every unit of the bank performs and works with passion, it works with motivation, and it works with empowerment.
Since he took over less than 2.5 years ago, not only has there been an expansion in branches, but also growth in their international network, tremendous growth as far as rural platforms are concerned, the investment in smart card technologies, in training and development, in career counseling for unemployed youth.
As a corporate customer, we have had a long relationship with Bank of Baroda, and I was very happy to see the bank's responsiveness in recent times.
I would say the visionary leadership provided by the leaders in the past and the contribution made by the Barodians who have worked for this bank in the past and in the present has really made this bank what it is today.
It is interesting to reflect back as to how I came into banking with my engineering background and the management background. Maybe my passion for numbers brought me to banking. After 35 years of banking, I feel that it was the right choice. No regrets. The journey has been fascinating, exciting, interesting.
We all know he is a good banker, but at home he is a great father, loving husband, and now adoring grandfather too. The title Mr. Dependable given by Business India is perfect.
The bank was set up way back in 1908 by Sayajirao Gaikwad III with the basic objective of providing banking facilities to the various people in Baroda. Over the period of time, the bank has grown into a gigantic tree spread all across the globe. We would like to ensure that the objective and the idealism with which this bank was opened by the Maharaja, we take it to the masses and ensure that his dreams of making banking facility available at affordable prices is made a reality in the days to come.
There has been rapid strides made in terms of financial literacy and financial inclusion at Bank of Baroda, as reflected in many programs that Bank of Baroda has successfully implemented for unemployed youth in terms of skill and training, as well as in terms of creating opportunities for the underbanked and the unbanked in various parts of the country.
So therefore, we have taken up this as a big challenge, trying to take financial inclusion to almost about 3,000 villages, having population of more than 2,000 all across the length and breadth of the country to be brought under this project.
One important initiative taken was to streamline the business lines into various verticals as wholesale banking, retail banking, rural and agriculture banking, international business.
It's truly India's international bank with a presence in over 25 countries and has been able to demonstrate strong risk management despite global turbulence, outstanding financial outcomes.
The last 2 years have been very challenging, especially in the context of the global crisis which emerged in the year 2008-9. But I would say that the bank has been able to really spot good opportunities during this time, and therefore these 2 years in the context of what was happening in the economy have been one of the finest years of performance for the bank.
In some ways, the fact that Bank of Baroda got this award today, and the fact that it was State Bank of India which got it last year, and the fact that before that, for 3 years or more running, it was the private sector banks which were getting this award, maybe there is a little story there. The private sector awards were coming when the times were good. India was giving 9% plus growth rates, and in 2008, 9 and 9, 10, this was the post-Lehman era. And it is in this era that the public sector banks started getting these awards. I don't know what it says, but I think it definitely speaks of the public and the consumer changing their perception about the public sector bank. So it could be in terms of reliability, it could be in terms of service, it could be in terms of pricing, it could be in terms of trust. But I think there has been a huge changeover with the collective bank of the public sector banks. And in this today, it is Bank of Baroda which is rated number 1.
The market capitalization, as we all know, at Bank of Baroda has grown tremendously over the last 18 months, particularly almost 4 times, reflecting on the strong confidence and faith of shareholders, stakeholders in Mr. Malia's outstanding leadership at Bank of Baroda.
I'm very happy to see the Bank of Baroda nominated and selected as the best bank for the year.
This award, which is a combination of performance across various factors, is something that has been a great level of satisfaction.
My heartiest congratulations once again to Mr. Malia and his team, and my best wishes that they continue to do what they have done even better in the coming days and years.
Congratulations to Bank of Baroda for winning the Business India Best Bank 2010. Would you please step forward? The winner can step forward, and the presenters can then present the award in a truly fitting manner. Here's the award, and there's the worthy presenters and winners. A huge congratulations to all of you, and especially to Somalia of the Bank of Baroda. Could you please say a few words, sir?
Good evening. Honorable Union Cabinet Minister of
Road Transport and Highways, Sri Kamal Nathji. Business India team led by Sri Ashok Advani, Chairman and Publisher, Madam Firoza Bilimoria, Managing Director, Sri O.P. Bhatt, Chairman, State Bank of India and torchbearer of public sector banks, distinguished members of jury, invitees, guests, colleagues from banking fraternity, and the team from Bank of Baroda, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great privilege and honor for us to be a part of today's function to celebrate Best Bank 2010 award conferred upon Bank of Baroda. All of us in Bank of Baroda are excited to receive this award, which is a great recognition given to us. Business India holds a place of pride in media and commands respect. It's a business magazine of repute, known as a companion to many corporate leaders who are driving the future of India. To get a coveted and sought after award from such a publication house of repute is definitely an attestation of our endeavor to excel in the banking industry. We at Bank of Baroda have been continuously focusing on quality, transparency, consistency, and customer centricity to forge ahead in the market. Our valued customers and well-wishers have always been a guiding force in our journey of transformation to deliver value to the consumers. Thus, the recognition of Bank of Baroda by Business India as Best Bank of the Year 2010 is indeed a repository of support and encouragement of millions of our customers and commitment and hard work of Team Baroda. We humbly accept the award and assure all our stakeholders that we shall live up to the ever-growing expectation of the customers. Going forward, we would endeavor to create a new age bank that meets the aspirations of the customers, and we would benchmark our service with the industry best standards. We feel delighted to join the league of past winners of this prestigious award. More importantly, the State Bank of India, the last year's winner. Awards and recognitions are always a testimony of having set new service standards in the industry and which motivates and creates a healthy competition to raise the bar of quality of service and productivity. I would like to particularly acknowledge the visionary leadership provided by my predecessors and the contribution made by Team Baroda for transforming Bank of Baroda to a tech-savvy, customer-centric, modern bank with a humane touch. In fact, I acknowledge the presence of two of my illustrious predecessors, Dr. A.C. Shah and Mr. Talwar, here in the August gathering. While articulating the organizational vision, designing strategies, and harnessing talent in the bank to execute the business plans forms the epicenter of our performance. The commitment of Team Bank of Baroda with unique dispensation of passion to serve and a passion to perform made the real impact that could create the differentiation. This award is a recognition of the untiring effort of 38,000 Barodians who wholeheartedly accepted the emerging challenges and made this to happen. The trends of superior quality of assets, higher profitability, better PE ratio, and a higher net interest margin, etc., seamlessly followed. We have also been optimizing the synergy of our large overseas presence to stand differently in the market and to better connect Indian trading community with the rest of the world with a range of products offered in India and abroad. This unique treat of making available global flavor to Indian entrepreneurs has been a rewarding experience to our bank. The recent emphasis on technology upgradation, spreading financial literacy, pursuing financial inclusion, and improving branch network has also been able to contribute to strengthen our commitment to customer centricity. Many thanks to Sri Ashok Advani, Business India, and the jury led by Mr. O.P. Bhatt, Business India team, particularly Mr. Ryan Rodriguez and Mr. Palash, and also a number of other members of the Business India team. I would also like to thank all our staff, patrons and well-wishers who have made this possible. I also take this opportunity to assure all our existing and potential customers, well-wishers and all the stakeholders that Team Bank of Baroda would continue to work relentlessly to create a bank of future with qualitative growth in the standard of services as we move forward with renewed vigor and zeal. Thanks to each one of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Manis, so much. Thank you very much. Your bank represents the finest tradition of Indian banking, balancing public sector objectives with robust financial growth. You are a bank not just to corporate India, but to small Indians, and a bank not just in India, but even in your overseas branches, you represent India. So thank you for all that you represent. I've tried to keep this program moving fast, tight, and sharp, because the Minister also has to leave for Delhi. But before closing, I must thank some people that made this evening possible, especially our Chief Guest, Mr. Kamalnath, for flying to Mumbai, gracing the occasion and making it so special. To the Wallonia Economic Representation Government of Belgium, our presenting sponsors. To Capgemini Financial Services India, our co-sponsor. UTV Bloomberg, our exclusive telecast partner, will broadcast this soon on their very popular network. The UB Group, who provided the alcohol for the evening, and the Taj Mahal Palace and Tower Mumbai, our esteemed hospitality partners, and in particular, Renu Basu and Mandira Goswami. And one more, Ramesh Tekwani of Take One Productions, who produced the film, and of course you, the audience, whose presence here has made this evening so special. Thank you. Celebrate the rest of the evening. Drinks are outside. Dinner awaits at the ballroom. Thank you, and continue to celebrate the best of India. Thank you all very much.